All right, my computer is telling me it's 12:15, so we're going to get started. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'm very excited to have Jay Ryerse here today to talk about cybersecurity, work from home, and the new normal. If I could have the next slide, cybersecurity during the pandemic. We're going to talk about cybersecurity during the pandemic, stay-at-home orders. We've all been thrust into this situation right now, stay-at-home orders, big impact on small businesses, and today we're going to talk about the impact on all of us. Okay, and I want to introduce Jay Ryerse. Some of you may have heard him speak in the past at our lunches at Bamboo. Jay Ryerse is the Vice President of Cybersecurity at Connectwise. He's a certified information systems security professional, CISSP, with more than 20 years experience providing information technology and security solutions to businesses of all sizes. Today, he works closely with IT service providers like Ekaru around the world and all their clients to provide insight and best practices for securing business networks, especially regarding the latest in compliance, vulnerability scanning, security monitoring, and advanced endpoint protection. Thank you so much, Jay, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Anne, and the rest of the Ekaru team. I'm thrilled to be able to do this remotely. Although I can assure you, like most of you, I would have preferred to have been, at Bamboo enjoying lunch with you as well. So we make do with the tools we have, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jay, and I'll let you take it from here.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today and giving us some of your time while you're probably having lunch. I'm going to keep the camera on just so you can see me, just in case you have questions. Speaking of which, if you have questions, you can use the questions pane to send them over to us. I'll do my best to answer them for you, as we go throughout the presentation. And there'll be a couple of polls in here as well, so I may ask you a few questions to kind of get a better feel for who's here. So in the absence of why, because I think we all know why we're working remotely these days, I'm going to share a few things you probably should know. So first off, prior to COVID-19, for most businesses, remote workers only made up about 3.2% of the total workforce. And pre-COVID, 44% of companies had policies that didn't even allow for remote workers. They required their entire staff to be on site. Now, obviously, things change. Natural disasters happen, people get sick, state of emergencies. But in the COVID-19 scenario, is truly unprecedented in the technology era. We really just didn't think this one through as well as we probably should have. Even though there were some people out there that were saying that it was possible, I don't think anybody really expected the outcome to look like it has for us today. I'm not really telling you anything new that you haven't heard. I'm just kind of framing that for our conversation, as we go through lunchtime today. So it's important that Anne and Fritz and the rest of the team want you to understand that cybersecurity culture needs to extend beyond the office walls today. And we know that includes protecting your family and protecting your data. Those are the things that we are most worried about and concerned about. So that's kind of why I'm here, is to run through this conversation and talk about some things that we're not talking about and you should be, and to help you position, getting back to work as part of the objects of what you're trying to accomplish. So I've got a poll right now. I'm going to ask this poll really quick, just so I have an idea as to who's in the room, since I can't ask you to raise your hand. So really quick, and you can pick multiple options. Who are you? Meaning, what is your role within the organization? Are you a business owner, a manager, technical operations administration, maybe sales or other? Everybody just a chance here to vote. We've got quite a few voting right now. And yep, if you can't hit the vote button, then go ahead and send it over in the questions, and that's fine as well. So let me go ahead and close that poll. I'll show you really quick to kind of give you an idea as to what the audience is today. So there are some business owners, there are some management, and there's an awful lot of people that are responsible for delivering services day in, day out. So that's good. That helps me kind of frame the conversation and make sure that we really know what's going on. And so with that, I've got one more question now that we know how to use them. And that is, today, What are you concerned about, or most concerned about? Again, multiple choice. You can pick as many as you'd like that are appropriate for you in your role. Great, numbers are creeping up. That's good. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close that poll now. I think we've got a pretty good set of results there to look through. And so it's interesting. I think we all would probably agree that the health of family, friends, and coworkers are important to us to some degree. Somebody here may have missed that one. That's okay. We won't hold it against you. For many of you, helping keep the doors open for the business is certainly an impact. Getting back to normal and what that work plan might look like is relevant. Only a small number of you are thinking about growing your business. And interesting enough, cybersecurity comes in second. And I have to tell you, when Ann and I were thinking about this, I actually figured that cybersecurity would not be top of mind. It would be one of the last things you're thinking about. I figured growing your business in cybersecurity would be at the bottom. So it's fantastic that that's why you're here, and that that's on your mind, because that's certainly relevant in today's conversations. So thank you guys for that. It also kind of helps me frame the rest of the conversation with you today. And so if you've been to any of the lunches where I've come up and visited with the teams up there outside the Boston area, you probably remember that, okay, this is the guy that had really good information and also scared the daylights out of me. So at this point, I'm not here to throw salt in the wound. We're all suffering this work from home thing. I mean, it's got me bouncing off walls. And I'm in Florida now, and we can actually go out, and restaurants opened up on Monday. So I've actually been out to dinner with my wife. I'm not bragging. It was creepy because there was like nobody around. You'd expect there to be lots and lots and lots of people. Everybody trying to get out, and everybody's being very cautious. A lot of the restaurants, even one we talked to last night that we like, a little Mexican place here in town, just said that they're going to wait a few more weeks. That they're not convinced that we've reached that threshold. So I'm not here to throw salt in the wound. And yet, if you don't know what the problems are, there's no way to address them. So when we talk about this, we always talk about the threat vectors, and that's how the bad guys get in. And the broad overview is that, look, they're using phishing attacks, which you probably know what those are. I don't need to retell you what those are. They're looking for ways to steal your credentials, taking advantage of people that have weak passwords, using trust relationships to gain access to things. It's certainly relevant. They're not using any encryption. There's no patches being installed on machines. Human misconfigurations, meaning something wasn't configured correctly. Malicious insiders and zero-day or unknown threats, which usually become known pretty fast, but they certainly are a high-risk issue for us. So a lot of research has been done on what securing the remote workforce actually looks like. One of the stats that was published the middle of last month was very interesting, and that is, as cyber people started to help workers go to remote workforce, and we were running scans and testing the home users' machines, we found that almost 45% of the home networks had a virus or malware-related issue. Now, that's kind of a big deal if you're being asked to use those machines to connect to your office network and deal with those kinds of things. So certainly of concern for everybody here on the call today. More importantly, what does a cyber attack look like while your entire team is locked in, right? And you've got a remote workforce and all of a sudden they can't work? It's worse than at least being in the office where you may have some paperwork, you can answer the phones, you can do a few things. It gets much harder when you've got users who have no access to the network because everything's locked down. This article came out about a year ago. Some of you may have seen it before, where CNBC did some analysis and determined that for small businesses, which is probably most of you on this call today, that's typically businesses with less than 1,500 employees, a cyber attack will cost them about $200,000 on average. Okay. Today, for a lot of you, that is serious salt in the wound, right? It's going to hurt if this were to happen to you because your income is probably impacted. You're watching your receivables. You're managing what's going on in your business to make sure that you've got cash to keep the operations going. And a cyber attack hits, and now you've just taken 2 big steps backwards. That's not good for anybody really. Now, what scares me the most is that the threat actors, the criminals, they're actually starting to get sophisticated. Gone are the days where they'd send you an email saying that there's a prince in Nigeria that wants to send you some money, right? I think we're kind of past that, and yet people still try those. They actually still come in. We still see them and block them, but it's getting harder and harder to separate what's a real attack versus what's a real email, right? Or a real website versus a not. And if we start looking at some of the FBI content in their Internet Crime Complaint Center, the IC3, history from the end of last year is that there's a lot of attacks going on, and Massachusetts has now made the map. Not the highest, not as bad as California, but now that you're on the map, that's not a good thing. So you guys are probably seeing more and more, junk email and those types of attacks coming in your mailboxes today. From year to year, if you saw my previous presentations, the two most common attacks are still business email compromise and ransomware. That has not changed from year to year. Those are the two that lead the way. Business email compromise could be where they gain access to your Office 365 account and they impersonate you by sending mail out from your mailbox to people asking for money, updating invoices, changing ACH information, and those kinds of things. And of course, ransomware is where the attackers actually encrypt all of your data and deny you having access to it until you pay them a ransom. And sadly, in the last few months, ransomware has turned into what we're calling extortionware, where they're actually stealing your data first and posting it on a website that only they know about. And then they send a link to you in your ransom attack when they encrypt all of your data and say, we know you have backups, but you can recover from that. But if you don't pay the payment, we're going to share all of your data anyway because we've already stolen it. And that's the kind of things that we really need to be able to talk about as business owners and as leaders in our business to understand what that means to us and what the impact is if it happens. So that business email compromise is really just skyrocketing. And when we take this data from the FBI, this is only on businesses that actually report to the FBI. And I can tell you, most don't. But some of the things that we worry about and some of the financial losses related to business email compromise include, fraudulent transfers of money and obtaining more information about your staff to use those to further infiltrate with a more targeted attack into your business. So if I know how your accounts payable person addresses every email, now when I gain access to that person's mailbox, I can send email that looks and sounds exactly the way that person would have written to begin with, which makes it more believable for the person on the other side. It's no longer a prince in Nigeria. It's now, Mary from accounting that just sent me this invoice. And of course, ransomware attacks. And these numbers are staggering. Like, I can't scream loud enough from the top of the buildings with a megaphone telling you ransomware is horrible for a business. Like, if you aren't planning and talking about this as part of your risk assessments, then you're missing out because a ransomware is happening in the US every 14 seconds to a small business. And it's not getting better, it's actually gonna get worse. They're saying that by 2021, by next year, it'll be down to every 11 seconds. And I'm really afraid to say
Hey, Jay, I just lost audio. I'm not sure if anybody else did. Hmm. Okay, I'm wondering if anybody could enter in the chat if you can hear me. I don't know if we lost Jay's audio or if we lost audio in general. Okay. Okay, I just got a Slack that folks can hear me, but Jay, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I see that too. So Ann, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Great.
All right. See,
Okay.
you got to be prepared. You got to have extra microphones available just in case.
Yeah, all this technology. It's amazing when it all works, but it's disconcerting. So I lost maybe like about the last minute. So maybe just go back to the
So
previous slide. Yeah,
yeah,
that
did
this
you
part I heard. Yeah,
heard that? Okay, how about this one?
that one. I think that's where it started dropping out. Right there.
All right. So some of the ransomware
Thanks.
attacks we're seeing, and thank you, Ann, for that. I'll pick up right from here and go back through it again real quick.
Thanks.
Are people that are saying that their machine was hit by coronavirus. Okay, coronavirus, as you all know, is a human, virus that attacks the respiratory system. Your computers don't have that, but by sending these kinds of messages to your computer and people clicking on it, they're installing the ransomware attacks that launch an attack against the machine. It's not actually coronavirus, and yet so many people are falling victim to that. And then they're everywhere. They're all over the country. They're in the Boston area. They're here in Tampa. They're in California. They're in Europe. It's happening everywhere that people are clicking on this coronavirus message on their computer. I can't even imagine that when it happens. When we talk about small businesses, 46% of the small businesses have been targeted by ransomware, and 73% have paid the ransom. I can't even imagine that would be the case, that would have to happen. But if you're working with a provider and you've got the right tools in place and you've done the right analysis on your business, you should never have to pay the ransom. That shouldn't be an issue. And yet businesses are still doing it and they're not talking about these things. So I'm glad you guys are here to learn about these things and to have these conversations, with your teams. So when it comes down to really any risk issue, but we'll talk about cybersecurity specifically, there are mitigation strategies, things you guys can actually do. So first off, you can avoid it. Very much like being locked in, you can just not do something. Stop allowing your employees to use, bring your own devices to work or given company issued equipment. Okay, you can understand and address it. Doing that business impact assessment, that risk assessment to figure out what it means to your business. Sometimes these things have no meaning to us, and so there's no reason to actually spend time focusing on them. But in many cases, you should be aware and be alert to what's going on. Next, you can ignore it. You can pretend it won't happen to you. If that's the case, a month ago, I dare you to walk into New York City. That would be crazy, right? But people still do. They don't think it's going to happen to them. They're in denial per se, and so they ignore it until it happens, and that's usually way worse. And lastly, you can transfer it. Transferring risk is almost always buying insurance, but of course, it's too late to go back and buy insurance once you've already been attacked. So these are things you should be thinking about from a mitigation perspective as to what it means to your business. Now let's talk about you, and your role inside the company. So you've got an obligation, obviously, to protect yourself and your family, but you do have the responsibility to protect your employer as well. And so I know that Ann will do this with your team if we need to, and Fred's and the rest of the team there. You guys should be doing training for your teams, talking about the vulnerabilities and the risk of working, outside the company network. There has to be some education associated with this to really help drive that awareness into your teams, so your teams are taking the right steps when they're working remotely. It's so much easier for an attacker to attack your employees when they've got no one to say, hey, is this email real? Does this seem a little bit odd to you? And instead, there's no one to ask, so they just click on it. The next thing you know, your network's infected, and that's certainly a bad day for everybody. So if you remember me from the last time we were out there, I'll tell you that cybersecurity people love checklists. Like, we like being able to just say, check, got this, check, got that, and go through that process to make sure we've addressed all those. And Ann and her team have actually created a couple of assets for you to help look and understand what's going on in your business. So you have either one, the questions to ask your team, or two, that you've got an understanding of why those things are important to you in your business. So you should see on the GoToWebinar control panel, mine's over here on the right, which is why I'm looking over there, there is a handouts section. In that handout section, there are 2 PDF downloads. One is this 18 things checklist that you can really use to think through your team working remotely. And then the second is this fantastic list. I'm actually really excited about this. I'm a little jealous I didn't decide to create it myself. Nancy, I'm guessing you had something to do with this, but this fantastic checklist from Ekaru that really kind of talks about the do's and don'ts and things that your team can be thinking about. And so whether you have Ann come on and teach this to your teams and talk to your teams about these, or whether you just hold your own lunch and learn with your staff or stand up, you should be talking about, you know, what they can do as employees and fellow colleagues to help reduce the impact of cyber attacks on your business. So with that, I'll look real fast. Are there any questions yet? Nope, good. And the audio is still good, so that's great. So these checklists will give you a foundation to go back and figure out where you are today. And then we get to go have the really fun conversation of, you know, what does reopening look like for our business? Now, I pulled this off of, I think it was US Chamber of Commerce. It's good as of a couple of days ago. So you can kind of see who's starting to reopen, who's got some limited reopening, and who's still got stay, you know, at home orders in effect. I don't think the greens are as green as they want them to be. Yellows are probably just getting started. I can tell you, I went out for lunch today. I got a taco bowl. I ran down, ran and grabbed it, and came right back down. It's, you know, it's a block away, so it wasn't a big deal. There was nobody else out there except for my wife and I, and the people that were doing the yard maintenance, you know, on the street that we live in. So it's going to happen, and you've got to start thinking about what that means to your business on when it's time to reopen. How do we do it? And, you know, we were looking at some of the things that are out there that have been published. Are you going to implement daily cleaning of your office? Or maybe even, you know, put in, you know, midday cleaning so that you've got somebody wiping down bathrooms, door handles, doorknobs. Are you going to leave doors propped open to avoid even having to touch doorknobs, right? How do you implement that social distancing? You know, still bringing people together, but staying far enough away that, you know, that there's less risk, or you at least reduce the risk and the impact. Do you still have stand-up huddles where your team comes in and you just talk about stuff? Or do you keep doing those from your desk but virtually? Do you split your shifts and go to 4-10s? And you have one team that works Monday through Thursday and one team that works maybe Tuesday through Friday, and everybody's in the office on Wednesdays is a neutral day. So that's the one day you all come together, but otherwise you kind of split the teams in half. And there's so many different things you can do to start figuring out how to separate your teams and to reduce the impact, that are things you should be talking about now. You know, what does it mean? Or maybe you're like some of our clients that we talked to. You were very much against remote working before this whole thing started, and you were kind of forced into it. And now that you're here, it's like, this is actually pretty good. It's got some really nice benefits that we can leverage. And so, you know, what does that look like for you and your business and your needs for commercial real estate and your needs for, you know, extending branches and those kinds of things? You know, can you do more from home? If that's the case, does your office become more of a hotel style office space where you don't own a cube or an office? You just use it for the day when you're there, and then when you leave, you're done and you wipe it down and the next person can sit there and work. There's so many different things to consider in this equation that you've got to start talking about them now, because when it became time to lock down, we had little to no warning, right? And thank goodness your teams were able to make it work for you. Hopefully it was as relatively as efficient as it could be. And some of you may be struggling right now to figure out how to make this stuff work because it's still a disaster. If that's the case, you know, talk to Ann and the rest of the team here, and I'm sure they'll be happy to walk through what they do for their customers and how it fits. And if you're just struggling in general, do some things. And we found some things that we really like, so I'll share them. We do morning calls now, and we call them birds of a feather. It's kind of an ongoing joke about all of us being locked in, so we're all the same, so we're all coming together. There's no agenda. We've got 15 minutes. We just talk about whatever, right? And it's been very lighthearted and helps us kind of start our day before we get into the grind of day in, day outs. And we've been doing, virtual happy hours, which are really like 15 or 20 minutes at the end of the day, where again, everybody's just kind of like coming back together again and taking this two-dimensional world and adding some voice and some fun back into it. Think about those things for your team and how you can impact culture, and use those to talk about cybersecurity. What are your staff doing, and what are they thinking about this, and what does it mean to them? The next thing I want to talk about is, as we start to come back, I actually envision, and from what I'm hearing from the cyber guys and the government people that we hear cybersecurity stuff from, they're telling us to prepare for rolling closures. Like, until there's a vaccine and until there's a true way to say, okay, you can go back to work and you're not going to infect your colleagues and you're not sick, it's going to be really interesting. So we may actually see this on again, off again, some people home, some people in the office, some people not working at all. I mean, it's going to be up and down for a period of time. And like, if you trust Microsoft, which you may or may not, they've canceled all in-person events through next June. Now, I get it. Microsoft is a massive company, does not compare to most of us. They probably have enough cash to live the year with no income. They've got income from all of us, so that they're not really at risk the way that a typical small business might be. But if you aren't planning around the risk of on again, off again to remote, that's going to be a challenge for you when it happens again. I don't want you to be stuck saying, oh my gosh, we didn't see it coming, we never thought of this. Document what you did this time that worked really well, and make sure that's in your plans in case you get to go back to work and then you get to go back home again, right? Document what worked, what didn't, then you go fix what didn't to make sure that it's as efficient as possible going forward. And that's really part of that proper planning for that on again, off again remote workforce that I need you thinking about. Now, okay, the reality is it doesn't actually impact me directly, but I'm on the same team. We are all dealing with the same issues. In our company, we've got 2,400 colleagues in 16 offices around the world. And I am like one of the ones that is like bouncing off walls because I've been traveling so much. I can't think of the last time I was home for 30 days straight, let alone for 2 months. I mean, last year I did 120 cities in 8 countries talking about cybersecurity. So these things are forcing all of us to think differently, and I'm in the same boat you are. These walls get very small very fast, and so you got to do things to expand them. So birds of a feather, have virtual happy hours, grab some of your vendors, grab some of your customers, and pull them into a call. And again, don't talk business, you don't need that, but just, hey, how's everybody doing? Family healthy, things good, and those kinds of things. And you'll be surprised at how that will be part of your plan going forward, to build in some check-ins that are not about work. We've got one where we brought our pets to the call, right? It was kind of silly, but again, we had some fun with it. We had, wear your favorite t-shirt, wear your favorite hat, just to kind of mix it up a little bit, almost like back when we were in grade school and we had hat day. All day long, our whole team's wearing our hats, and we're doing it with pride, but it was fun. And our clients and our partners that were seeing us were like, oh, you guys are all wearing hats. Isn't that kind of cool? It's silly, but it's fun, but it works. And yet we're still challenged with, okay, here in Tampa, we've got, I think, 6 offices, like the whole floor of an office where our whole teams work, and multiple buildings all on a campus area. How are we going to clean that? How are we going to manage who's allowed in, who's not allowed in? What percentage of our workforce are we going to allow back in? And we're looking at a 15% cap for now. And we're going to limit who gets to come back by who has the worst internet at home, and will not be putting family members at risk. There's not a parent or an elder person or a very young child in the space that could be impacted in case you did catch it. And those kinds of things are things we're thinking through. How do we create social distancing? Well, it's easy with that much space, but I know it's a challenge for you guys in your work environments. And so be talking about those now with your team. And you'll be shocked if you ask your team what they think you should do. They probably have some fantastic ideas. So as we kind of start to wrap this up, a few things that I call my J-isms, or truisms when it comes to cybersecurity. First, in cybersecurity, what you don't know will hurt you. So if your team doesn't have visibility into logs and motion and people and technologies and your risk tolerance and your risk preference and those kinds of things, you can fall victim. And so the more we teach you and teach your teams about what good looks like and how to avoid making those mistakes, the better off you're going to be. I know that Ann's team spends a lot of time with her clients doing just that. And if it's been a while, ask her to come back and have that conversation again. That'd be a great, virtual happy hour, talk about cybersecurity and what your employees can do to, keep the company's data secure. Those matter. So that's my first truism. My second one is, it kind of goes back to, I think it was a Ronald Reagan quote, trust but verify. I'm going to say trust your team but verify. And it's a tough conversation. And you've got to be prepared to ask your team some of the tough questions when it comes to technology and what the impact of a cyber attack would mean to you. See, I'm actually trying to help you get rid of the salt altogether and not even make it available to be tossed into the wound. But you got to have that list. So here's my most common things that I might ask a business owner, if I was running a business today. So first off, I would want to know, when is the last time you successfully tested our backups? Like you actually test restored data and you saw that you could do it as planned, okay? If you're a business owner or leader in your business, you should be asking your teams that question, whoever's responsible for managing your backups. Next, if I'm a business owner, the few of you that are on here that are business owners, or even if you're just a leader in the business, you want to know, how long would it take to recover from backups after a cyber attack? And is there any impact of COVID on our ability to recover? And so that's two parts there. I'm going to kind of break it apart. First off, recovering from backups, while you can do things spin up fast in the cloud and there's certain kinds of backups you can do that, not all backups are designed that way. And when we were all working from the office, recovering backups in a few hours or even a day or so might be okay. It's that recovery point and recovery time objective. So RPO and RTO, recovery time objective and recovery point objectives, that as a business owner, I wanted to understand and give you my feedback on. Like, we can't be down for more than X amount of hours. And then the question is, now that everybody's working from home or working remotely, where are the delays? Can our IT team get into the office? What is that process going to look like? Do they even have a key, or are they just totally locked out? When the impact is across multiple workstations and you've got 20 employees, and each one of them around town has their machine that's infected as part of the attack, how do we get those back to the office so they can be updated and then be shipped back out and put back into production? So that's an example of the impact of COVID on someone's ability to recover after a cyber attack. Next, what are we, or should we be doing to protect our business against email compromise and ransomware? Now, those are the two, if you remember back in the beginning, and I talked about these a year ago, they haven't changed, are the two most common things that happen to a business that cost the business money. And in today's environment where we're trying to protect cash, trying to make sure we keep the doors open, a cyber attack that takes away cash would be a horrible disaster. That would put many of you out of business today, and I don't want that to happen any more than anybody else does. So let's talk about these things. Let's figure out what it means. You may go back to your mitigation strategy and you may do nothing, but at least you had the conversation and you understand what it means to your business. Next, I'd be asking, when can we schedule a risk assessment to better understand the impact of COVID and cyber threats to our business? Now, You may have done this 6 months ago, may have done it 3 months ago. The reason that I'm saying do it again or reconsider it or put it at the top of your list now if you don't have it is you should do a risk assessment anytime things change. I'm not talking about you add a new employee, but when your network design changes, you add new equipment, you remove equipment, you send your workforce home, those are all changes that should instigate a new risk assessment so that as a business leader, you understand what the impact is and you can take mitigating steps based on your knowledge and understanding of what's actually going on. Lastly, you've got to talk to your team about what an on again, off again scenario looks like, because the odds are strong right now that that's what's going to happen. And I'm providing feedback at a very high level from what I hear from CISA, from InfraGard, from other background groups that are knee deep in all these things and have that government and private partnership to be able to share some things, but not all. In joining those groups, they went through background checks. I went through an FBI investigation, and they identified that yes, Jay is a person that will hold this information in confidence and can rephrase it in a way that matters. So talk to your team again about talk to your team about that on again, off again scenario, because there's a high probability it could happen to at least somebody on this call, if not many of you. Lastly, thank you guys all for your time. Thank you, Ann, and the team for allowing me to spend part of your lunchtime with you. If you've got questions, I'm happy to take them now. You can ask them in the questions panel. And if not, you can talk to the Ekaru team just about the questions or concerns about protecting your remote workforce or the impact of common cybersecurity threats to your business. So Ann, welcome back.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Jay. And wow, so it's a big change for you. 120 cities in 8 countries last year, and you're home for 30 plus days now. So that's a big change.
Yeah, what's really crazy is that in January, February, and early March, I'd already been to 40 cities.
Wow.
So I was actually tracking ahead of, and my calendar was going to be that much worse. So now we're doing everything virtually until it's safe to travel again.
Yeah.
And I'm doing like 3 of these a day in varying degrees. So I hope that I'm getting the message out there, and I hope it helps you and your clients.
Yeah, I think what you said about the the on again, off again, I think is going to be a big factor. We were all kind of thrust into this, had to make changes really quickly. Now we have to kind of undo it, and we might have to do it again. So I love that piece of advice. What worked, what didn't work. The J-isms, trust but verify. You got to check. Is somebody using a home computer that their teenagers using and downloading all kinds of crazy stuff on, and then now that's connected to the office network. That's a really big that's a big issue.
That stat that we found that 45% of home users' machines were already infected.
Yeah.
And to think that
Shocking.
We're now connecting those to your office where your data resides, and once they're connected, the attackers can jump from one machine to the next, and that just puts your company data at risk.
Yeah, we really, encourage folks to have, obviously things had to change really quickly. We do have extra security licenses from some of our key vendors, including Connectwise, that we can help with the home systems for no charge until the shutdown is over. I think redoing the security risk assessments, and who could imagine? I read a lot of science fiction, and this just feels like we're in a science fiction. I know people talked about this. There's TED Talks on what would happen, but it's hard to even remember our mindset, in January before all this happened. It's tough to think about, but I just want to thank you so much for being here today with us.
I appreciate the time, and again, I look forward to the time when we can come back up and do an actual in-person lunch and learn and seeing everybody.
Yeah.
But until then, we'll keep doing these.
Yeah, great. And anybody, if you have questions, you can reach out to me and the Ekaru team anytime, and if you'll get a recording of this session as well. So, Jay, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.